If you add up all the sovereign and corporate debt in the world right now, the total sits at roughly $315 trillion. That is nearly 3 times the size of the entire global economy. Every good and service produced on Earth tripled. This debt spans almost every corner of the map. It's not just a struggle for developing nations. Wealthy export powerhouses like Germany, Japan, and China carry massive liabilities. The United States alone is navigating over $38 trillion in debt. Our instinct is to treat these numbers like a household budget. We assume that if someone is $100 in the red, there must be a distinct wealthy lender somewhere else sitting on a $100 surplus. For every borrower, there should be a separate creditor. But if practically every nation on Earth is deeply in debt, who is holding the other side of that $315 trillion receipt? If everyone is paying, who is actually getting paid? When the total debt is 3 times larger than the economy itself, the math of settling up becomes impossible. It suggests the global economy doesn't function in a straight line from borrower to lender, but as a system of interlocking loops. To see those loops, look at the $38 trillion US debt. While it's easy to imagine it's all owed to foreign rivals, 70% of that money is actually owed domestically. The US government is effectively borrowing from its own people. This debt is held by American pension funds, local banks, and individual citizens who own physical savings bonds or treasury bills. These institutions buy government debt because they need a predictable, safe place to grow capital. For a pension fund or a bank, a government bond isn't a bill to be paid. It's an interest-bearing asset that secures their financial future. This means a massive portion of the national debt burden is simultaneously the foundational retirement and savings account for the nation's own citizens. The international side of the ledger is just as circular. Foreign nations like Japan and China do hold trillions of dollars in US debt, but this is a reciprocal web. The US owns foreign debt, while Japan and China own pieces of each other. Export-heavy nations recycle their trade surpluses back into the global loop by buying the safe debt of deficit nations to keep the system moving. Sovereign debt behaves less like a loan to be repaid and more like a perpetual game of financial musical chairs. Liabilities are continuously traded and rolled over rather than settled to zero. When this cycle of private lending slows down, central banks step in with a process called quantitative easing, or QE. This is the specific mechanism used to inject liquidity directly into a frozen system. During QE, a central bank creates new digital reserves out of thin air. It then uses that new money to buy its own government's bonds from commercial banks and other private institutions. This replaces long-term bonds with immediate cash, which lowers borrowing costs for everyone. The government treasury gets cheap financing, and the private sector gets liquid cash to keep the economy from stalling. Under QE, the debt is simply transformed. It moves from a fixed-rate bond in the private market to a variable-rate liability on the government's own consolidated balance sheet. Imagine if a country had a way to instantly pay off its entire national debt. Every bond settled, every penny returned overnight. Instead of fixing the economy, that sudden disappearance of debt would likely trigger a global financial collapse. Global banks and pension funds use government bonds as the ultimate risk-free collateral. These bonds are the foundation that allows banks to lend to businesses and households. They are the plumbing that keeps the money supply moving. This interconnected web of bonds provides the load-bearing scaffolding for modern money creation. It is the essential infrastructure that allows the global financial system to remain upright. Because the system depends on rolling debt over rather than paying it off, its only real fuel is trust. Specifically, the trust that a government will always be able to make its interest payments. When a government prints money recklessly to cover its debts, that trust shatters. The result is total devaluation, where stacks of banknotes can barely buy a bowl of rice. In many developing nations, a loss of investor confidence causes borrowing costs to explode. These countries fall into a debt trap, forced to choose between paying interest and providing basic services, often leading to international bailouts and civil unrest. Ultimately, there is no shadowy external creditor. The money the world owes is owed to our own domestic institutions, our global trading partners, and through our own savings to ourselves. Global debt is the fragile, interconnected web that ties the modern world together. To explore more of the invisible systems running our lives, hit subscribe.